Welcome to Essential Estate Experts, the estate planning podcast and ultimate resource for understanding estate planning and elder law, brought to you by Screenfire Media. Let's get started.
Well, hey there, folks. Chuck here, and welcome to Essential Estate Experts. We are so glad you're here with us today. I am joined by my co-host, Mark Zasada. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chuck. I think today's subject is going to be of special interest to attorneys who work with high net worth families after someone passes away. And that subject is selling real estate. How do you deal with it? How do you maximize the value? How do you minimize the complex burden of real estate sales to your law firm and trustees? We're heading to Manhattan to talk to Howard Morrel and Leslie Hirsch. They head up Morrel Hirsch and Advisors. This firm has really established a unique specialty in trusts and estates. They work closely with attorneys, family offices, and high net worth families as they deal with properties in trusts and probate, as well as the valuables inside. And since we're talking to Morrel Hirsch, we'll probably be hearing about some celebrity properties as well.
Before we start, I have to remind our audience that neither Essential Estate Experts nor Screenfire Media endorses any products, firms, or services. We merely inform and entertain. Also, although you may hear attorneys speak, this is not legal advice, and nothing here establishes an attorney-client relationship. All right, Leslie, Howard, thank you so much for being here today. We're excited to have you on the show.
Great, glad to be here.
We'll start with you, Howard. Could you give me a brief overview of Morrel Hirsch and Advisors and what inspired you to focus on the niche of trusts and estates within this ultra-high value property market in New York?
It's a great question. What prompted my interest in the field of trust and estates started originally with architecture. I saw the architecture that was peculiar to Chelsea and what was then the Flower District. Beautiful buildings, all from the 1800s. You could buy a 25-foot wide loft building with 5 lofts for $80,000. I saw an opportunity to come in and help those owners sell those buildings to the next generation of owners. And that's what led to the next step, which was becoming a licensed lawyer and taking that to the next level.
Yeah, so that was back in 1982 when Howard first started. New York was a completely different place back then. You can hear the prices. Now those $80,000 buildings are $8 million, $10 million, $100 million, depending on the neighborhood. It's amazing what happened. Since then, Howard had already been in the real estate business for some time, and we started working together, and we have been selling real estate together as a partnership and growing a real estate team in New York for the past 20 years. And I would say about 10 years ago, we started really focusing on working with trust and estates attorneys and making estate sales and trust-owned properties a big focus of our business. We saw that world as an underserved niche in the real estate market, and we saw that we could add a lot of value to the estate attorneys to help them in their practice, to help the clients who are going through an estate a loss or a transfer from one generation to the next. And today, about half of our business involves estates or trust-owned properties. And we just love working in this part of the market. It's been good to us, and the situations that we experience are always very interesting, very different. And we feel like we add a lot of value to the attorneys and help them in their practice and help them provide the best service to their clients when their estate clients have to sell a property.
What are the special problems faced by estate and trust attorneys when it comes to real estate?
Some of the special problems that attorneys encounter when it comes to real estate are the actual real property or the chattel that's inside the 4 walls of the subject property, then the condition of the property, and then the family members, and then what's the process? What do I do first? The lawyer is confronted with a family in grief, a family that has to ascertain what they want to do with the property. So these things lead to providing an honest valuation of what the asset is worth, the real estate itself. And we do that with our own in-house appraisers. And so ascertaining value is one. And objective of the estate is the other. Does the estate want to have liquid cash? Do they want to dispose of the real estate, or do they want to keep the real estate and rent it? Is there too much of a tax burden? Do they refinance? There's so many issues at hand. So what we do is we spend the time with the client to find out what the client wants, what their goals are. And we work backwards from what their goals are and furnish the attorney with a full report on that. And attorneys aren't going to do that typically. They're focused more on the more obvious things. What do I do with the real estate? They don't have the time, the energy, or the nuanced interest. The human factor is very important. They don't have the idea of spending time with each person and interviewing each person and finding out what they want. That's where we add a lot of value.
I can imagine if I'm an attorney working with a family, sit down and ask them, what do you want to do with this $10 million property in Manhattan? And they go, well, that's a big question, because part of that is how much could we get for it? What are the special considerations? I mean, Manhattan, for example, is a very complex situation, I'm sure, between everything with air rights and co-ops. There's a lot of questions you got to answer before somebody says, that's what I want to do with the property. And I can imagine it'd be very difficult for an attorney to answer a lot of those complex financial questions.
A lot of times the attorney is one piece. When we're talking about high net worth clients that they're servicing, the attorney is one piece. They have financial advisors, they have tax advisors. Sometimes the beneficiaries of an estate are all living in different countries with different tax challenges. Number one tends to be taxes. What happens? How do we organize this sale to avoid as much of a tax burden as we can? That tends to be number one. Or is there a better year to sell, one year or another? Or if selling this property is going to then create a tax challenge for something else that the family is trying to do. So the attorney in dealing with an estate has a challenge because they have the legal matters to deal with. Then they have to think about the tax implications, the physical property, what's inside, to Howard's point with the contents, what furniture, what jewelry, what's going where, what's being auctioned. So the attorneys look to us to help them figure out the value. Is it a good time to sell in terms of the market? What are the taxes in terms of the local taxes for selling? You have transfer taxes in New York. Then there's the capital gains tax, what they paid for it, what their gain might be. Sometimes in the co-op situation in Manhattan, they have a flip tax. So a flip tax is a fee to sell that a co-op would charge to the owner. So sometimes it could be 1% of the sale price, could be 5%, could be 10%. Each building is different. So we advise on the big picture and all of the factors that will come into play when they sell, and then help them decide if it's the right time to sell, or if maybe they should rent the property, or maybe they should just transfer it to an LLC entity or a different structure. So each family is different. And so, yes, we come in as an advisor to the attorney, and the attorney then advises the family that they're working with, their client.
Does that team of people often include a financial advisor that the family's working with and you're talking directly to?
Yes. Sometimes we don't talk directly to them. Sometimes we do. But they're always there, usually, especially when you're getting to families of a certain net worth. There will be a financial advisor overseeing the entire portfolio of the family. It's important to understand what else they own, what other countries they own in, what will they be doing with the cash from this sale, where will it be going, where will the financial advisor be investing those funds. And also in an estate, you can have, and you often have, multiple beneficiaries. So each of those people have their own set of attorneys, financial advisors, CPAs, a whole team. Let's say it's a family with 3 siblings and the parents die, and now they have this property. And then once it sells, the proceeds will be split amongst 3 people. And each of those 3 people have their own people. So we have to coordinate all of these pieces, and the attorney does also, but we help with seeing the vision of everyone, putting it together and trying to create the best outcome based on the goals of all of the beneficiaries.
I could really see you playing a role as kind of a common reference point between all those parties when it comes to making these decisions, with an expertise that the attorney probably doesn't have, might have, probably doesn't in that environment.
The point of it is not just the expertise, but the attorney doesn't have the desire to dig down and get so granular, because it crosses a line. If the attorney may be an executor, may be an executrix, or may be a trustee, or maybe just simply the family attorney, he's not or she is not going to want to dig down and get into all these granular tasks. They need to deal with big picture, and they're typically delegating this to someone that will report to them, and all these things cost time and money. They're delegating to a paralegal or a junior attorney that ends up being a lesser experienced person doing all these due diligence items to get definitive answers, when this is what Leslie and I do every day. We have most of those answers on hand. We're experts, and in a sense, it takes all that work off the attorney's desk. So the attorney is grateful when we approach them and say, we can do all of this. You handle the contract of sale, we'll give you all the data, we'll give you all the values, all the appraisals. We'll provide everything that you need. It will be neatly on your desk. And the bonus is that most of that work is included in our transaction commissions. So it's a win-win for the family, for the attorney, and for us.
I think it's time to give people an example of one of these transactions, something that was important, maybe kind of pivotal to your experience that kind of shows some of these steps and the issues.
We've done 1,000 of them. The one that was quite interesting and also quite fun. The patriarch, the father, had been a very domineering person. He had a private hedge fund or family office. And basically the two remaining daughters knew nothing about the finances other than dad had a 10-acre estate on the ocean in Southampton and a huge single-family home in New York and homes in Florida and an office in New York, a leased office. We came in and we helped the sisters first get a realistic handle on what the value of the assets were, because their father had said it's worth X. The reality was it was worth Y. And we came in and provided the values and provided backup information for each one of the homes. And then each one of the homes was filled with personal items and filled with valuable items. And they were really grieving. They wanted money, but in this case, they were really grieving. They really had feelings for their dad, which is not always the case. So we were part therapists, part forensic artifact explorers. We were doing everything. They had car collections, art collections, all kinds of collections that we had to provide values for the family. And we laid everything out like a menu at a restaurant with all the prices and everything there. The attorney was extremely happy because they never would have done that. And we maximized the value of that estate because we took the time to get the highest value for each item and each package, each bucket of items. So it was fun. And it's happened like that a number of times. But that one in particular was probably a $300 million estate. So that was a lot of money at stake. And we maximized the money, whereas they could have gone somewhere else and maybe lost a third of that money, 100 million. Someone else could have come in and said everything is worth 200 million because they didn't want to spend the time. They just wanted to get rid of it, to move the merchandise. Whereas we took 4 months to get it together when somebody else might have taken 4 weeks and just lost $100 million for the family.
So there's a lot more than a real estate sale going on in that story. You're actually dealing with all these items, you call it chattel, all these items in the houses and personal items. And can you do all that as part of selling a property?
Yeah.
What we found, this is kind of comical, but we were moving this one person's estate. We were clearing out the apartment for them. And there was a desk, and it was basically a piece of junk. The desk was getting thrown out, and they had thought they emptied out everything in the house. I just happened to open up the drawer, and there was a bag of money. And it wasn't just money. It was a large banking bag, an old school bank bag, a canvas bag filled with silver dollars from the 1800s.
Wow.
It weighed around 12 pounds or more of pure silver dollars. And it would have just gone in the garbage. The superintendent maybe would have taken that desk out to the street. And while it was in the elevator and he turned it upside down, the bag of money maybe would have fallen down, and who knows?
Yeah. So we work with vendors. We have a long list, depending on what personal property is in there. We will help the family get appraised values for all of those things. We help sell it for them. Sometimes we are the ones selling it, but oftentimes it's working with a third party expert So because there are so many different items that could be in a property, a silver spoon collection, a Van Gogh, certain type of furniture, antiques, modern furniture, Steinway piano, all of these things. So we look at ourselves from the attorney's point of view as being a single point of contact where they say, okay, this is what we need. This is what's in the property. We need 3 different opinions of value for each of these items. So we go to our sources and get those for them and put it together in a nice book. They say, okay, this is what this auction house said about the value of the paintings on the wall. And here's a second opinion. And here's what the pottery is worth. And here is some options of who could buy the Steinway, or you could donate it here. And here are the different things that we can do with the physical contents. So we give them all of those opinions, and then the attorney takes those and shows it to the client and helps them make the decision of what to do. And so then sometimes we are hired then to help them sell the items or donate or junk. And it all comes under the umbrella of selling the real estate, because in order to sell the real estate, we need to either empty out the property or stage it or reorganize it. And also the family members or whoever the beneficiaries are, they need to have the items shipped to their homes or come in and tag what they want, depending on how the will was structured, or everything goes to an auction house and just sell everything or donate everything. We help organize all of that in the context of ultimately selling the home. And where we save the attorney and the client time and money is we help them organize the timeline of when these things should happen. And our staff is knowledgeable in all of these things. They're able to be there to babysit and to watch over the auction houses coming in and the appraisers coming in. And so in the past, the attorney would have to do that, or their paralegal would have to do that, taking them out of their legal office. And so that can save a lot of time for the law practice. It just becomes much more efficient.
And you also fix up the properties, right? You handle that piece of it?
Yes, we do. In looking at the goal of selling the home, we say, okay, let's get all of the items out of the house, or maybe we keep some there for staging purposes. And then maybe there needs to be some repairs that need to happen. Our goal is to get the maximum price for the asset. So we need to make it look its best. And so, yes, if there are repairs that need to be made, we give a recommendation to the attorneys. And then we can also help to advance the cost of those repairs through a program that we have. And then we can also just organize, and we have vendors who can do painters and drywall repair people, floor repair, lighting, all the different types of contractors and vendors that you might need to fix up a property. We have those, and we can have them come in and give their price opinion, and then we can organize who's doing what when, even as furniture is being moved out, and what order to do all of the repairs so that we can get the property on the market as soon as possible, because time is money when you're thinking about the sale of a home. This is often the largest asset that an estate has. Sometimes it's art or jewelry, but the real estate is one of the largest assets of the estate. And there are carrying costs with real estate. Maybe there's a mortgage. There are definitely property taxes. In New York, you have common charges or maintenance fees that the building charges every month. So every month that we're not selling that property is another ding to the ultimate proceeds of the estate.
You mentioned advancing funds for repairs. You actually do that?
Yes. We have a program that can advance up to $25,000 towards repairs, sometimes more depending on the size of the property. And where that comes in handy is when an estate is illiquid, where maybe it hasn't gone through the full probate process, or maybe the beneficiaries are arguing and no one wants to pay for it out of their own pocket. But ultimately, they will share the proceeds of the sale. So we want to get the maximum amount of proceeds. So we can advance the cost of repairs. It's paid back to us at the closing. There's no extra fees, no interest. It's just kind of a loan to help get that work done. So it can even cover not only just repairs, but moving property out, shipping to family members, getting the physical contents removed, putting things into storage, helping with moving costs. So it's very handy because sometimes the attorneys don't have access to the estate's funds yet. I mean, a paint job that costs $10,000 could end up bringing an extra $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to the sale value of the property. Some of these properties, especially on Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, have been in the family for 50 years. They haven't been touched in 50 years. Definitely needs at least a paint job to get it ready for sale. So we're happy to do that, and it adds value.
Talking to attorneys, I know this is often a huge issue where the money's tied up, but stuff has to happen. And so if you can make things happen on the real estate end by advancing funds, I could see that taking a huge burden off of the families and the attorneys who aren't taking phone calls, people yelling at them saying, how are we going to get this done?
Yes.
And you're right, the clock's ticking because real estate costs money every minute you own it.
Yeah, even just junk. In Manhattan, you don't have this issue when it's a single family house somewhere in a suburb. But in Manhattan, when we're talking about vertical living and condominiums and co-ops, it's very hard to throw out the garbage. So there's a lot of junk. Even in the nicest estate, there's a lot of junk. So no one wants to get rid of mattresses and bed frames and old dressers from the 1950s that have no value, and nobody wants that brown wood furniture. And the building can't throw it out. There's an insurance cost. There's a liability issue. There's a garbage fine issue. You have to hire a company with a dumpster. You have to hire licensed and insured workers with big insurance policies to come and throw the things away. So even just the amount that you would have to spend several $1,000s just to throw away the junk. So if we can help do that for the family, as opposed to showing a property filled with junky furniture and just emptying it out, we'll add a lot to the sale price at the end.
How does all this get paid for? What's the typical cost of doing all this extra work and selling a house?
In terms of our fee structure, we operate like a typical real estate broker. So it's commission-based, and we don't charge a heightened commission rate. We incorporate this as part of our service, and it's part of our standard commission rate and price. If we get involved in actually selling items for the family, then sometimes we will charge a fee depending on the hours involved. But we try to add a lot of extra value to our service so that the estate is not having to pay extra, but we are saving them a lot of money.
So without committing here, typically if you're cleaning out a place and you're doing basic fix up, that's included in your normal fee?
Yeah, the estate will pay for the vendors. Like if we're hiring a painter, the estate will pay for the painter. The estate would pay for the workers to throw things out. We can advance the funds for that, but we will be organizing it, supervising it, making recommendations of who to hire, suggesting the different companies that they may want to look at to sell the different items. And we certainly include a lot of staging for free in our services. And so they're getting a lot more of our man hours without an extra charge.
Even things like the order. We've had this discussion before, Leslie and I, and things that one wouldn't think about, but the order of the process, when to get rid of what. It's as obvious as we have to unload or dispose of X amount of items before we paint. It seems obvious, but without us, some people might go ahead and paint an apartment with all these things in it before they remove that, or try to do the floors. And these things may seem obvious to people, but it's not so obvious as one would think. And we create a structure so that we can tell them, we'll give you the vendor for the floors, we'll give you the vendor for the paint. We'll tell you, first you should hire junk luggers or hire this moving company and that moving company. And we explain how to get the certificate of insurance into the building and who to talk to in the building to reserve the elevator, and all these things that people wouldn't know, that the people inheriting the real estate wouldn't necessarily know. But we try to incorporate, as Leslie said, as much of this as we can into the brokerage fee, because that gives us a great value. It really makes us more important than you would think, because now they don't have to be concerned with any of the logistics.
Just a practical example of that is an estate where let's say there are several children inheriting the proceeds of the property, and they live in multiple states across the United States, and the property is located in New York. There's a lot of stop-starting that has to happen. One brother has to fly in and look at what they want, and then the other one can't get there until 2 weeks later, and then they have to coordinate on making a decision. So because we've gone through this so many times, we can make recommendations like, okay, why don't we do a video of the property and everything that's in there? Why don't we do an inventory of all of the items and send it to you digitally or virtually? There are also vendors that we work with. There are a lot of interesting sub companies that we partner with that have software. You do a digital inventory of the contents of the property. Each family member goes online and bids on what they want in terms of order of attachment. And then, so if there's any kind of dispute, they can make a decision on, okay, well, that one is so attached to this crystal figurine, but this one really likes the fur coat. And so now we can negotiate amongst the family members of who gets what based on an order of ranking. It's really interesting what can be done. Or it could be just simple, like we'll take a video for you and show you everything that's there. So you don't have to fly in from wherever you are in the world and look at it. And then you can say, oh yeah, no, that chair, we don't want it, or we do want it, or I want this shipped to my house in Switzerland, or whatever the case may be. That in itself saves so much money and time for the family and helps us get the property emptied out and staged a lot faster than we would have to wait for 3 different people to coordinate their travel schedules and their work schedules. That's something that we do all the time. We try to be problem solvers. Each estate is like a puzzle, and it has its own goals and challenges and pieces and parties involved and personalities involved. And our job is to try to put the puzzle together in the most efficient and cost-effective way to benefit all of the individuals involved. We try to be the problem solvers for the family and for the estate attorney.
Wow, that is quite a service. I guess the trustee is normally faced with that, like negotiating, getting prices for everything, and horse trading between the beneficiaries to who gets what. If
Yes.
you're taking part of that burden from the trustees, and I guess from the attorneys, that's pretty significant.
It is. Every time we meet with an attorney face to face, they'll inevitably say, where have you been all my life? We could have used you yesterday. It's inevitable. Whenever we get the opportunity to be face to face with an attorney, it's the same thing every time, because they just don't want this responsibility. The trustee doesn't want it. The executor doesn't want it. The attorneys don't want it. The families don't want it. Nobody wants it. Please get the work done and call me when it's over. And that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a trustee myself, and it can be so overwhelming. You have no idea what you're getting into. And it's the kind of thing you do once in your life, if you're lucky, and you have to learn this. It's like being thrown into being the CEO of a corporation with no preparation, knowing nothing about it. Where are the assets? What is this worth? How can I get somebody to get
Precisely.
a Steinway piano down from a 35th floor of a high-rise in New York? Yeah, I can see that.
You've both been doing this for a decent amount of time, and you've got a ton of experience here with this particular type of thing. Is there any particular transactions or moments in your career doing this that come to mind that really kind of demonstrate why you do what you do and the special services that you provide?
Well, one that is really a favorite of mine and a highlight so far in my career and in our business was we had the opportunity to represent the estate of Gunter Sachs, who was a German fashion photographer, and he had been married to Brigitte Bardot at one point in time. He was the owner of Halston, the fashion designer, his townhouse in New York. That was 101 East 63rd Street. And anyone who watched the Halston movie or followed Halston's career, that house was famous. It was the after party house for Studio 54 and that crowd in the 70s. And everyone that you could imagine, every celebrity that you could imagine was there in this home. And Andy Warhol wrote about it in his book. And it was kind of Andy's home away from home. And Liza Minnelli and all the people at that time that were the who's who crowd was hanging out at this house. And it was also designed by notable architect Paul Rudolph, who was the father of the modernist movement in architecture. And he was the dean of the Yale School of Architecture. And so it was just a really unique house, the way it was built. And it was such a pleasure to be involved in this, selling this house and marketing it. But in terms of the needs of the estate, there were many complex layers involved, especially regarding the tax implications around selling it, because the sons of Gunter Sachs all lived in different cities around the world and had multiple properties and multiple tax complications. We were also at that time in the middle of a major tax change that was happening that would impact estate tax and impact the transfer taxes charged by New York upon selling a home. So it was imperative to us to sell within a certain time frame before these tax changes took place. Otherwise, there would be a big tax bill and increase and reduced profit for the family. So we worked with many financial advisors, tax advisors, attorneys, spanning multiple countries and jurisdictions. And we were all trying to put this together to get the best result for the family. And so that was really amazing to work on. And we did a lot of staging because at that time the house had been pretty much emptied. So we did some staging there. And another one, a notable case that comes to mind is on Park Avenue. It was an estate being sold by the family of a prominent philanthropist. And they had a huge collection of art and personal property, a Steinway piano. They had at least 70 pairs of Ferragamo shoes. They had bags and jewelry. And so the family had in mind certain vendors that they wanted, that, or it was in the will, like these certain pieces of art should be sold through this and that auction home. So we had to work really hand in hand with the family because the family was handling some of the pieces. The attorney was handling some of the pieces of furniture and art. And then some of it had to be shipped. And then some was junk. We had to get rid of that. We had to stage it and sell it at the same time. So that was really a collaborative sale where we weren't handling everything, but we were handling some of it. And what happens sometimes in an estate sale is like halfway through, you think you have a plan about what items are going where and to whom. And then it changes. And then they say, you know what, we're going to have a family auction. And now all of a sudden there's a second round of people like cousins and nieces and nephews that weren't necessarily named at the beginning now say, okay, well, they should have these pieces. And then they come in and items that you thought were being sold or donated are now going to a family member. So you have to pivot and reorganize it. And so we had different vendors and estate auction companies coming in and buying certain pieces of items. And that was a really interesting one to work with. And again, with the human level of all of this, you have people who are going through a grieving process. And sometimes within a family, there's maybe one family member who just says, just get it done. I don't want to think about it. I'm not attached. But there's another one who is attached and they want to take the time and go to the property and look at all of the things and decide on what they want to keep and what they want to sell. And so we're in the middle of that, helping them to navigate that. We also have cases where one spouse has died and maybe the other spouse is going to assisted living and they're having a really hard time. And so we have some great companies that we work with. We call them moving mentors, who basically they're part mover, part therapist, part social worker. They can come in and help the surviving spouse with their grieving process, help them move out of the home, help them find the assisted living facility that they need to go into, or maybe it's just another apartment that they need to move into, but they're having a hard time having it set up in a similar way. Sometimes we have cases with people with dementia or Alzheimer's or health problems that need to be taken into consideration. And another piece of this that we should definitely talk about is the guardianship aspect of our business. So Howard is registered with the courts to work with court-appointed guardians, and our team can be the real estate brokers for people who are under guardianships. And the judge is the one who has to assign the real estate broker. So you have to be pre-approved in the court system to be assigned to these cases. And sometimes they're very high profile people, but they've had mental health issues and now the home is worth a lot, but they had a hoarding problem or it's in disrepair or Sometimes it's in great condition, but we have to be extremely discreet because the press is getting wind of this and that we want to keep the sale out of the press. So that's an interesting part of our business, that we deal with unique challenges as well.
That's happened a lot of late. Within the past 3 to 5 years, we've had at least a dozen high profile estates where the owner of the property is a celebrity or very well known CEO, sometimes household names. And the attorneys can trust us to not disclose anything about what's going on. And we get calls frequently from writers just even inquiring, are we doing anything? Is there anything brewing? But the good news is that, like most of our transactions, we don't disclose who the person is. And oftentimes, more often than not, we're signing non-disclosures with the guardian just for that purpose. So there's nothing disparaging that could be said. Families are very sensitive at this time. So it's helpful that they know they can trust us.
So that's critical. I can imagine if I'm an attorney for a high profile client and I'm dealing with someone who's now in dementia or other complex circumstances that the press would love to discuss, finding somebody who can handle this with discretion, who has a long-term track record, certified by the courts and the whole thing, I can imagine that being a really important challenge that I need to deal with.
Yeah, we are definitely a unicorn because it's counterintuitive for a real estate broker not to toot their own horn. But we are what you might call a white shoe firm in that regard. The old school white shoe firm is we don't kiss and tell. We just take care of the work and we get the job done. And that goes a long way with family offices.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't mentioned family offices up till now, but I'm sure that is an important part of your clientele.
We're dealing now with one that's a dynasty trust out of Southeast Asia from the 1800s. So it's beyond the scope of what the normal person thinks as wealth. I'm not sure the exact words, but it's basically wealth that can affect the economy of a state or a small nation. The money is so substantial and so deep. And we just go about our business. It's just 5 more zeros on the end of the number, and we just do our job. So it's interesting.
Wow. Well, you could get a movie out of that. Sounds like Crazy Rich something. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm sure we can't spill too much tea on that, but that is a fascinating world to be operating in. And I'm sure they appreciate your discretion when it comes to that sort of person. It's just so cool to hear how all of this comes together and that you found this way to, like you said, be a truly unique presence in the mixture of real estate and estate planning and trusts.
I got to ask about co-ops because, like, that's a New York thing. I don't understand it, but I can imagine when somebody passes away who owns a co-op apartment in New York and tries to pass it on to their beneficiaries, there's got to be something going on there.
Well, yeah, it's like you get a phone call, say, oh, your long lost aunt passed away in New York City, and congratulations, you have just inherited a Park Avenue co-op. Wow, amazing. Well, guess what? You can't live there. What do you mean? Because you cannot pass the co-op board. So what happens is the co-ops in New York City are very unique to New York City. They are the entity that owns a building, and you can buy an apartment in this building, but it is subject to the approval of the co-op board, which is made up of owners in the building. And the co-op board has the right to reject a sale or a transfer for any reason, and they don't have to disclose the reason. These were built as a way of being exclusive homes that they could control who the neighbors were. And on Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue, you have some of the most notoriously tough co-op boards. And if you inherit a co-op and you want to live there, you have to get through the co-op board approval process. So someone could inherit this property and with giving the example of a niece inheriting it, and maybe the niece is an art student and doesn't have a work history or any income to speak of, the co-op board is not going to necessarily approve them. Or maybe there is a way to get approved, and that's where our expertise comes in, with the right reference letters, with the right trust structure, showing that there's a trust in place to pay for the carrying costs, and that there's no risk to the board of having someone live there that's going to be partying all the time, or of not the right social caliber that they want in the building, or not enough money to pay for the property well into the future. We have ways of massaging the story and presenting the best possible version of the applicant's profile so that we can get them approved. But sometimes we have to tell the estate, unfortunately, for this building, that's not going to work, and you're going to have to sell it because there's no way to get this person in there. We had a family who inherited a Park Avenue co-op, and there was 3 brothers, and they had been using the co-op for years, while the parents were alive, kind of like as the family pied-à-terre in New York, where whenever someone was in town, they would go stay there. And now the brothers have their own kids, and they fly in every couple of months and stay there for a week. And then when the parents died, the co-op said, we don't really like the way you've been doing this for so many years. We need one person to be the new owner, and we need the other 2 brothers to apply to have the right to come and use it. And so we had to put together that board package. So what Howard and I do for these transfers that are not a sale, but they're just intra-family transfers of a co-op ownership, we will help put together the board package so the attorney can hire us to get the family members through the board so that they can enjoy the property that they've inherited. And yeah, it is unique.
That is crazy. And I can imagine I'm a state attorney, I'm doing trust administration, or I'm advising a family office. And so they say, oh, I got this, I'm going to move in. And the attorney goes, well,
yeah,
call these guys. They're going to help you figure out whether you can actually move in. I would much rather do that than trying to sort through the board of a co-op myself.
We have a funny one. This one is very unique. It was an estate, and the person inheriting the estate had a dog. It's co-op. The dog was trained professionally. It was a German Shepherd, extremely well trained. And the building had a policy that pets need to be interviewed and needed reference. It was pre-COVID. It was not a multi-million-dollar deal. It was probably about $2 million. So there was a live board interview. And one of the board members, who was the president of the board, did the board interview with her dog on her lap. And the person who was going to inherit the apartment brought their dog because the dog was there to be interviewed. So if you know anything about dogs, you don't bring another dog into another dog's house and expect that dog to behave like a robot. And the German Shepherd behaved perfectly. And it was a problem for the board. We brought reference letters for the dog. I swear to you, we had multiple reference letters from certified trainers and breeders. And the dog sat there. And if you know anything about dogs, little dogs can yap. And big dogs, when they're yapped at, want to respond. And the dog didn't respond. And there was still issue with the dog. Only in New York.
well, yeah, the board president's dog was the yapper,
Yeah, it was a little white lap dog.
and it was causing a fuss while our German Shepherd was acting like an angel.
Whoever thinks it's easy to be a real estate agent,
Only in New York. Only in New York.
gotta hear these stories.
No. And it's unfortunate. It's not pleasant to talk about, but it is a reality of dealing with estates that sometimes someone dies in the apartment and they need help. What do you do with the body, or if there's biohazard
Everything.
that needs to be cleaned up? We have experience dealing with that. And the family members don't want to deal with it. If we can take that burden off of their plate psychologically, that's a huge relief before the family goes in there to take a look at the furniture and the art or whatever's in there. And that's a specialty that we have learned how to deal with, and with dignity and respect to the family, trying to save any type of discomfort as much as we can.
How do people engage with you? Do attorneys call you? Do the families call you? What's the most common route?
We are often contacted by the attorneys, but it could be the trustee. It doesn't have to be an attorney. A trustee could be anyone who is appointed as the trustee. But oftentimes, a lot of our business is coming from the estate attorney who is recommending us to the family. And we're called in to be interviewed and to discuss the property and what we can do for the family. And sometimes, over the course of the attorney's calendar year, they'll call us in anticipation of an estate coming to market to ask us what's a ballpark back of the napkin value of this home because we're thinking about selling it or we're going to put it into a trust structure. So attorneys can call us, and they do call us at any time over the course of the year, not necessarily when there's a sale happening immediately, but maybe there will be in a year or 2 years. We're very patient. The estate process takes a long time. We know we want to be there as an advisor, as a helper to the attorney throughout the process of their client's estate structuring or a trust structuring process. For us, it's not just about the sale, it's about the service and the relationship with the attorney, because the attorneys will come back to us for repeat business. And that's why we love working with estate attorneys, because they have many, many clients. And it's not just a single sale, it can be the generational sale for the family that we handle, the grandparents and then the parents and the children and the grandchildren. They can count on us to give them information throughout the course of the year, not only if there's a sale involved immediately.
So we've been talking about New York. This is a totally unique service. And if I'm an attorney in another state, hey, maybe I'm interested. Does Morrel Hirsch and advisors operate beyond New York? If I'm in California, can I call you guys?
The answer is yes. To Leslie's point, we quarterback every deal. We become the single point of contact. But if you have a deal in Texas, or if you have something in Los Angeles, if you have something in Miami, we have counterparts that we've developed and maintained relationships with over the past 25 years. We'll set up all the events. By the events, I mean we'll set up the protocol and then we just work with them remotely. If need be, we travel back down, but we've developed a great network that we worked with throughout the US and Europe.
And New York City is the type of city where you'll get people where the New York property is just one piece of their portfolio, and they have another home on the West Coast, they have a Florida home, and they have maybe something in Europe or somewhere else. And so the estate attorney in New York often says, well, okay, we have the New York piece, but this family also has X, Y, and Z properties. And so we help them with all of that. For example, we had a client once, an attorney who the family inherited a castle in Italy. And the attorney said to us, do you have someone who can help us sell this castle? And actually, yes, we do have the person who specializes in castles and manor homes. The pro tip is that you don't want to inherit a castle, unfortunately. It might be fun to go there once and dance around and live out your fantasy, but in reality, you don't want to own it because they are a fortune to own and maintain. What usually happens is the castles get donated back to the government because you don't want to maintain them. It's become out of fashion to live in a castle anyway. But yeah, it's funny. But yes, we do have that person for specialty properties or even pieces of land. Sometimes there'll be a house here, a house there, and then a random piece of land somewhere that was part of this estate. And how do you value that? We had one in the Hamptons where they inherited like this piece of wetlands. Well, you can't do anything with it. But then the township, as part of a conservation efforts, was buying back these wetland properties. And so the attorney said, can you help us get a value for this piece of wetland because the township is going to buy it back. So we had our specialty appraiser that we knew who came and helped them with that. You just never know what type of property will be in an estate.
Well, again, Howard, Leslie, we could talk with you about this all day, but I know that you're both very busy and we're going to let you get back to doing what you do best.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you both very much. It was fun to do. Thanks.
For those interested, you can visit their website at morrelhirsch.com. That is MorrelHirsch.com. morrel.com and check out their trusts and estates section. They've got a lot of really great information on their site, and they are incredibly helpful with this sort of thing. So absolutely the people to turn to if you're an attorney or if you're dealing with the trust and estate yourself, to make your attorney aware of this service. And again, thank you for listening to Essential Estate Experts. We appreciate you making it to the end of another episode. If this provided value to you and you think it would be valuable to someone else, pass it along. That's the best way to help this podcast grow. And as always, we appreciate you joining us today. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening to Essential Estate Experts, presented by Screenfire Media. Please remember to like, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube, and rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. It really helps. For more information, please visit screenfiremedia.com. Essential Estate Experts is copyright Screenfire Media, all rights reserved.